like there's no such thing as like passive home services revenue. Like we'll do $200 million next year. I'm going to be just as involved next year as I was at 0, as I was at 11 million, as I was at 25 after the acquisition, as I was at 120 that we're doing this year. It's like there's none of this like, oh, just sit back, relax, let the guys do what they're going to do.
Welcome back to another episode of the Revenue Reimagined podcast. We have what I would say thus far is our most untraditional guest with us so far today that I am so friggin' excited to talk to. Ned Arick is the CRO at Addix. He is a seasoned pro in both startups and scale-ups, having been both sales hire #1, sales leader #1 across multiple ventures. Ned's tackled everything from launching a home services company, despite, according to him, these are not my words, never lifting a hammer, to driving Beam Solar to 8-figure first-year growth and leading it through a successful acquisition. He also helped rebrand and merge companies into Addix Home Services, which we'll talk about, achieving a small $100 million in its first year. Previously, Ned was head of growth at CloseLoop, where he delivered double-digit revenue gains for clients through data-driven strategies and team development. A self-proclaimed data nerd like myself, an early-stage startup expert, Ned has built high-performing sales teams that have driven multiple exits. With strategy, systems, staff, skills, and most importantly, relentless drive, Ned turns hustle into results. Ned, thanks for joining us, man. I am stoked to have you here.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Adam. Yeah, thanks, Dale. And I actually didn't even realize you were talking about me for about half that time. So that's kind of cool.
Listen, man, it's the radio in me. I got to introduce you right, and then you could take that clip, and whenever you walk on stage, just play that.
Dude, I'm going to play that every time I walk into a room at my house.
Listen, like, I'm down for that, man. I love it.
Ned, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it. So as Adam was giving you the great introduction, I was starting to think, what's the hardest role? The first sales person, the first sales leader, or actually executing and running your own company?
That's a really, really good question. And actually one I've never thought about before. It's probably because I put all of them really deep back in my head, so I never think about them. But I would say it really depends. So it's very difficult to be the first salesperson if you're joining a company that doesn't have product market fit. The founder hasn't done a lot of the pre-work, right? Like I can imagine that would be a very, very difficult role to be in. I can say I've been blessed to be in sales roles where, as the first sales leader or first sales hire, I've come into an organization where they had a lot of the customer stories already, even if it was friends and family, right? Like there was a lot involved there. But I think there is nothing more difficult personally than starting from ground zero in a co-working space in Greensboro, North Carolina with your business partner, launching Facebook ads and seeing $1,000 a day go on your business credit card and being like, oh crap, we should probably start making sales because neither of us are making any money. And then there's nothing probably more harder than hiring people, making sure that they're set up for success. Then there's also nothing harder than hiring people that are going to do good work for the homeowners that you sell to. So I think it's all dependent on how you look at it. But I would say in my career, the hardest thing that I've done is for sure starting Beam with Alex and really just scaling that as quickly as we did. Because with fast scale comes a lot of problems as well, right?
Sure.
So,
yeah, it's the problems with scale are interesting. But you touched on something that I think a lot of people in B2B software don't think about, right? So as a CRO in B2B software, obviously you're focused on marketing, you're focused on sales, you're focused on customer success. But you don't have that component of physical product or physical service. And I've done physical product, and that's very hard. And I think a lot of people don't realize that selling software is one thing, but getting this pen from point A to point B, whole fucking different conversation. But services is interesting. You said hiring the people that are going to deliver great service to your customers. Talk to me about how that affects just your overall revenue mindset when you're building the business, because transparently, most of our listeners probably have never had to think about it other than, I hope our software is good and I hope I have a great, customer success person who could deliver, but that's very different than I'm going to your home and I have to deliver this service.
Yeah. One of the biggest things that I brought over from software was the customer success aspect, right? And it's interesting because every other day on LinkedIn, I'll see someone be like, customer success is dead. And I'm like, well, we built an 8-figure company and then 9 figures from honestly our customer success team, right? And so we almost started backwards. Like Alex and I started having conversations with general contractors, installers, electrical board members in North Carolina before we launched the sales process, before we launched marketing. And the reason is because when you are providing a service, and especially when you're providing a service to a homeowner, you're going into their space and they're expecting you to do a bang up job. And if you don't, all their friends, everyone they go to church with, their group that they work out with at the gym, by the way, everyone on Facebook is going to hear that you are the worst company that's ever worked, just because you left 2 or 3 cigarette butts in their yard, which to most people you'd be like, oh, well, that's not a big deal. Clean them up. I'm sorry. No, to a homeowner, that's a big deal. And so, I would say that what we did really differently than in most cases is we really focused on that back end fulfillment piece, really even before we said, hey, let's put in our marketing, sales systems and strategies. And, I would even say for like B2B software, right? What does your adoption look like? What does your onboarding process look like? What does your speed to value look like? How quickly can you get someone from putting, a dollar amount on their credit card or in the invoice to them seeing that first result, right? And, we have in our North Carolina, South Carolina markets, when we first started, we had your HVAC is installed in 72 hours or it's free.
Wow.
Right? Because it was like, when we first started, it's like, oh, we might be able to schedule 2 weeks out. Well, number one, we're going to lose that revenue. And number two, everyone's going to be pissed off because it's the middle of summer and we need air conditioning, right? Like, well, you better go put some AC in someone's house. So, I think there's a lot to be said around focusing on the fulfillment, understanding what that post-sale process looks like, and understanding, like, obviously your whole entire operating model from start to finish. But if you can get the fulfillment down, especially in a service-based business, and really decrease that speed to value, I think every service company wins there.
Yeah, you're actually building the company the right way. And I think that's what's wrong with a lot of tech companies, the way they built them, is they're just built like they're trying to grow as fast as they can, grow at all costs. They really haven't thought about the back end of it. They're like, and this is a function of the investments, the investors,
for sure,
the CEOs. Like, this isn't really a function of like, let's see what the customer wants. Let's figure out what that value is. When we articulate or derive that value, then we can work backwards to it. And in fact, we're, speed to lead or speed to quote or, speed to value, all the things that you're talking about. I think people are now realizing, in 2024, like if we don't get to those things, either if your tech's not good enough or your service isn't good enough, like people, one, they're not going to spend money with you. Two, they're not going to come back to you. So like repeat customers, as you probably know, like repeat customers is like so much less expensive than trying to like find new customers at the top of funnel. So building that backwards, I think, is exactly the right way.
I've never heard you sound so intelligent, by the way, Dale. I'm very impressed.
That was impressive. I should start interviewing you.
I'm very impressed. He's looking. He's on a performance improvement plan.
Okay, got it. Cool.
It's the end of the year. I gotta do better. Ned, I gotta do better.
Well, at least Adam, you're not firing him before the holiday. Like some of these companies are. So
the funny thing is, not to sidetrack, Dale, I forget who it was, but we did have a customer who sent an email, and basically it was like they basically said that I worked for Dale. Is the short version. They didn't realize that like we're partners. They're like, well, I need to check with Dale to see if this is okay. And I'm like, dude, like I don't work for Dale, and Dale doesn't work for me. Like we're all trying to help you together here. But it was funny. And Dale never lets me live it down.
Oh, yeah, you shouldn't.
It's true. Well, it's funny because we lead, like one of us leads the account, and it's inevitable. Like whoever's leading the account, that ends up happening. But
Oh yeah, I mean it happens with our lenders and vendors all the time. Like I'll email them and they'll be like, "Oh, we've got to go through this person," and I'm like, "Yeah, that's literally just accounts payable. I just need you to answer my question."
and that's the same email coming to me, by the way. Yeah, it's funny. As you guys were building that backwards model, like not the backwards model, but from customer success to value, do you guys implement on the front end of it? And it sounds like you do. And I think this is where a lot of software companies have a hard time articulating that value and telling them, like you said, if we don't install it in 72 hours, it's on us.
Yeah.
Like, how do you like leapfrog that, or how do you make it better, or like what's the competition do when you do that kind of stuff? Like, are they trying to replicate it? What does that look like in your business?
Yeah, we do HVAC, roofing, and solar, right? And it's a really interesting market to be in because if you look at our business, you've got solar, which is the Wild West, right? There's no regulation. We've got buddies that just literally get a team of 10 guys. They'll go to Lincoln, Nebraska for 10 days, and all those guys walk out with $40,000 in their pockets, right? So it's like this weird Wild West industry where, like, yeah, you've got to be very forward thinking, right? With what your value proposition is, how you're selling, who you're selling to, being very strategic on the doors you knock or the people that are calling in. And then you've got roofing and HVAC, which are these kind of antiquated markets. And they're markets that really haven't been, the only word that's coming to mind is sexified. That's not a right word, but like it hasn't been made sexy because it really is built by great technicians and great construction guys that don't necessarily know how to build a business. But what they do know how to do is do great work and build great relationships. And so when we come in to a market, it's very interesting for us to have to actually beat out Chuck and his truck. Because Chuck and his truck has been there for 30 years. He's got 500 clients he goes out and services at 10 p.m. on a Sunday, right? He's the best price. He's got, he goes to church with the people. I think that's what you run into more often when you're a conglomerate like us. And what that's actually sort of forced our hand to do is actually kind of build a roll-up model. When we see a guy in a market that's doing really well, roofing, HVAC, things like that, what I do love about it is they're always open to talking to us, right? Like I have conversations every day with HVAC owners and roofing owners, just like, hey man, what are you doing? Like, what's happening? What's working? Like, where are you getting your skilled tradesmen? Like, where are you going for that? And they're really open. But what that also does open the door for us as well is to say like, hey, here's some jobs that we have. Hey, go do these jobs. We'll subcontract to you. And then we start to just consistently give them to them. And then eventually we're, rolling up their company and they're, chucking their truck by addicts now. But, to answer your question, Dale, it hasn't been something that we've really had to be super concerned about, right? Because the model really is do good work, build great relationships, scale your business. And scaling your business really up until a couple of years ago in HVAC and roofing your $10 million revenue is a great company. And don't get me wrong, it's still a great company. But once private equity started coming in and there was a lot of this like outside money, most of what's happening is these mom and pops are getting rolled up into, these larger organizations, and they can't keep their pricing, things like that. So yeah, we haven't really had to like deal with a ton of like copycats.
The whole Chuck in a truck thing is interesting because
we're just talking about this with a client.
Yeah. We work with a service company now, and this is the first time I heard it. We were actually just like in a meeting with the senior executives and the investor, and they're like Chuck in a truck, and then you just said it, and so it made me think about that. But what it was sparking in my head was, first, Florida is like the worst place for roofing because like we both live in Florida. And
so does Ned. If you looked at your show prep, you would know.
Oh, that's right.
That's right.
That. You do live in it.
Neptune Beach, to be specific, Dale.
Busting me. But it's like, it's the perfect area to do HVAC and roofing. So it's like, how do you competing against these little guys, and like you said,
Yep.
they're in church all the time, but it's all about good work. Like
Yep.
I see people in Florida, because I'm originally from Boston, hustle, work ethic up there, like the contractors, all that kind of stuff. You get down here and it's like, where are the people? So I think it's
Yeah.
easy to compete against some of those
Yeah.
guys.
We love, like, our New York office is, I mean, it's our most efficient market, just really due to the, like, I mean, we could literally call our foreman and he'll have 10 guys on a roof within 5 minutes. Like,
Yeah.
they're all just like, and I mean, I'm talking like an emergency job. He's like, cool, yeah, I've got 10 guys right now. So it's wild, the work ethic up there.
Yeah, it's funny to me. Like, people, services is such a different business. Like, it really is, right? There's so
Yeah.
many components that I think 95% of software people would go to services and have no effing clue what to do, right? Like, you have
Yeah.
real margin, like real human capital. Like, you have to pay someone to go do this. Plus you have an HVAC unit that has a cost. Like, there's just, it's a whole different way of looking at P&L. Talk to me a little bit about, on that topic, like, what was that transition like, and how did you go from being a successful CRO in the tech world, where we all could probably do this shit with our eyes shut, to like, this has a cost and these people have a cost, and I still, like, great, I could bring these businesses together, but shit, man, profit margin's not 90% here. People buy from people. That's why companies who invest in meaningful connections win. The best part? Gifting doesn't have to be expensive to drive results, just thoughtful. Sendoso's intelligent gifting platform is designed to boost personalized engagement throughout the entire sales process. Trust me, I led sales for a Sendoso competitor, and I could tell you, no one does gifting better than Sendoso. If you're looking for a proven way to win and retain more customers, visit sendoso.com.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you look at a good, like a good company in home services, you're looking at 15, 20, 25% margin. And you're like, you're going to get 8 to 10x EBITDA from a private equity company, right? A typical HVAC company acquisition's 3 to 5, but that's typically because they've got pretty low EBITDA, right? So, I mean, it was definitely a transition. That's for damn sure. Like, it was, I'm sitting there, I'm like, dude, let's just throw a bunch of money at the wall. Dude, I've got the best marketing. I've got the best sales systems, right? We are going to crush. And then, like, you start to realize, all right, our customer acquisition cost on that deal was 13.5. Okay, we bought the unit for 3,500. Like, you start doing the math in your head, like, not even a spreadsheet. And you're like, oh shit, we just only made $1,000 on that.
Right.
Job.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we're not going to grow to $1 million off of $1,000 profit margin. And so I think that one thing, and I really don't think this matters whether you're in home services or if you're in a software company. If you understand the unit economics very well as a leader, I think you win, right? And I made a comment. I forget who posted this the other day, but I made a comment on a post of, like, I really think that the reason that I am where I am is because early on in my career, I just, like, went all in on spreadsheets, and math has always come easy to me. And so I just, like, went all in on understanding what 1 + 1 is in business. And, like, we all know that, like, business truly is math when we break it down at the end of the day, right? It's leads to opportunities to, how many discovery calls, to demos, to whatever it is. Like, it all is math at the end of the day. And so once I realized that, okay, cool, for an average job, this is how much we are going to spend, right? And that changes sometimes month over month. And, we started the company in 2021. We were selling like 1.99 interest rates, right? So that's a completely different conversation than what we were doing this year at, minimum 5.99 interest rates. We're able in 2021 to buy a 3-ton HVAC unit for $2,500, one at a time, from the warehouse. Now we're lucky if we can get it for 45 at volume, right? And so there's a lot that just goes into the understanding of the P&L and being able to understand, okay, cool, each section of it, of, like, just here's our gross revenue, here are our expenses, here's our cost of goods sold, here are just, like, looking at it and being able to, at the end of the day, understand, like, if we need to be at a 20% margin every job, which is our goal, we have to price it this way. And then from there, you have to understand, like, well, there's also, in home services, there's go backs. Well, I've got to pay a guy to go back and fix that job.
Right.
right? So that eats into it. And so you just start to understand your forecast isn't just like, man, I think we can get this many leads and make this many sales and we'll be good. It's you start to forecast the entire funnel, right? You start to forecast lead costs. You start to forecast your cost per meeting, your cost per sit. You forecast your cost per sold opportunity, which doesn't necessarily mean customer acquisition cost yet, because people can cancel, right? And they can cancel within 3 days, right of rescission across the country. So it's like, now what's our cost of progressing deal based on that cancellation rate? And then what's our cost per install? But then what's our cost per install plus go back, right? And what's our, like, what is the minimum that we can forecast and what's the maximum we accept? And so it's a much more, I wouldn't say it's more in depth, but you just start to think about things a lot more than I did when I was in software. It was like, okay, cool. We just need to make 100 sales in software and we're going to be good. And we have, 80% margins on this. And all we have to worry about is like salaries. Cool. Like now it's salaries, it's benefits, it's our guys on the roof, it's insurance, it's the trucks, it's all of these things that people don't realize. And it's why I wouldn't say like I'm against people saying like, hey, go just buy a home service company and you'll be a millionaire. Like, I think it's decent, like, advice. Like, hey, go to these unsexy markets and you're going to have some success.
The next RR revenue stream, RR Home Services.
There you go. That's actually a pretty cool name. But I think, like, what people don't realize is in this model, there's so much more than just, like, buying a company and calling it a day. Like, you are a people manager.
Yeah.
Like day one.
Oh yeah.
And like there's no such thing as like passive home services revenue. Like we'll do $200 million next year. I'm going to be just as involved next year as I was at 0, as I was at 11 million, as I was at 25, after the acquisition, as I was at 120 that we're doing this year. It's like there's none of this like, oh, just sit back, relax, let the guys do what they're going to do. There's a lot of involvement making sure that the systems, process, structure are happening and the SOPs are being followed constantly.
So you would say that a services company CRO, which I also think is something that people just aren't used to, is much more involved than a technology company CRO as you scale.
I would say so. Yeah, I've definitely worked more in the last 4 years than I did in tech, like, and not necessarily from an hours perspective, because
Sure.
if you ask my family, like, I'm kind of a workaholic.
We all are.
But from
it's the nature of the CRO beast.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But I would definitely say from like a hands in the dirt with the guys, literally sometimes with the guys, like, yes, I am making sure, because I mean, when you've got guys on roofs, it's, although we've got a head of construction, if we get screwed, if we have OSHA roll up and our guys aren't tied off on the roof, we get fined. We lose licenses. Like, that's a big deal. So we've got to always be making sure that the things are happening, whether that be the sales process too. Because like, if our guys tell someone in a house something that is inaccurate, especially when it comes to solar and there's government funding involved, that's an attorney general that gets involved. That's not just a bad Yelp review, right? There's like legal matters that come into that. And so, yeah, I mean, I definitely find myself a lot more in the weeds on a day-to-day basis. And I think a lot of technology CROs would benefit from acting like a services CRO a lot more.
Could not agree more. Would you ever go back to tech, Ned?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But I bet you'd be a lot better too. Like, and I just wanted to make sure Adam knows that 1 + 1 actually equals 2. So I just wanted to make sure that you got that formula down.
Yeah. I always drop those really smart nuggets on podcasts. That's why people have me. It's just like rudimentary math.
But it's really funny. One of the things that you were saying, because I actually don't think a lot of tech companies understand their cost of goods. Like, I don't think they understand their cost of service. Like, they think we were just talking about this with a client on customer acquisition cost, what the real customer acquisition cost is, what is included in that customer acquisition cost. All of a sudden they're looking at EBITDA at the end of it. And they're like, well, we're not making as much margin as but we're supposed to be making 80% margin on software. But it's like, okay, do you really know when you spin up a new customer on your AWS server, like what that really costs and how much, technology you're using? Like, people don't know it. I think every customer you go into, we try to ask, what does it cost you to bring on one more customer? And they can't answer the question. Like, they're like, oh, it's not much. Like, that's what you hear. And the tech people don't really want to tell you on the tech side. And then you're just hiring people. And then all of a sudden, like, the margins aren't making sense anymore. But I think because we're working with a service company, kind of like what you guys are doing, we're trying to build comp plans, and we're used to building comp plans on, 10 or 12% commission rates.
Yeah.
But you can't do that in the margin business, right? Because if you're selling a big deal and you're comping them at 3%, 4%, whatever that looks like in a services business, you're cutting into that margin that has real labor involved in it that you can't really get out of. So I do think one of the things that you said, the faster companies can get into their numbers, whether they I think the reason why we don't do it in tech is we don't like the numbers. Like, we don't like our conversion rates. We don't like our close rates. We don't like our average deal size. Cause like, you go and you ask, what's your average deal size? I don't know. It's somewhere between like 10 and 50,000 a year. It's like, that's not your average deal size. And then
ours is 71,720.
Yep.
And you know that right off the top of your head.
And I know exactly what our cost per install is. And the thing is, I'll tell you this, is what I said about like more companies need to like act in this way is where in tech, you really do run into a lot of vague answers, right? Like when I was with Closed Loop, I worked with founders like all the time, worked with over 300 founders in my time at Closed Loop, and they didn't know. And like when you start to dig into the numbers, like you were saying, Dale, it's like there's not this understanding, or they know one part of the business amazingly well, and then the rest is just like, well, if this is humming over here, like the rest must be doing well. And I think there's like what I really like harped on big time with our organization is like, if you guys called up any of my VPs, they could tell you exactly what the conversion rates are of our reps down to that one rep that just started in South Carolina, right? And the reason is because we have in a lot of home services companies, there's silos, right? It's like, hey, we've got our services team. They don't really talk to our sales team, who doesn't really talk to our marketing team, because there really isn't a marketing team. That's a third party. But it's like, we understand at the beginning of every month the amount of money that needs to be spent on marketing in order to hit our revenue goal, and what our conversion rates need to be. And we know on a daily basis. And this is where I think that, the question of like, have I done more work in the home services is like, I'm looking at these numbers on a daily basis. What are the fluctuations daily so that we can be making these? Because we're such a transactional sale as well, right? Someone could come in and we could have $8,000 in our bank account from them by the end of that day. Right. And so that's, I think, the biggest thing that I would say for a lot of tech people is we look at quarters. And I think that was the biggest transition for me is like, I'm looking at, when I first got there, I was like, oh, let's look at quarterly numbers. And it's like, no, if you're looking at quarterly numbers, you're 3 months behind where you should have been. Way off. And I think that's,
and we say that even in tech, we're saying like, at least look at it monthly, like, because it snowballs. Like, there's a domino effect, like that small snowball. Like, if you're off like a percentage point, now you're off 2 percentage points. Now you're off 4 percentage points. And then you're like, now you're way off. And how do you backfill any of that funnel, or backfill any of the close rates, or know that you got to give a special deal, or whatever it looks like if you wait too long?
There are so many things that I think, to put a bow on it, that can go from tech to services and make services really successful, but vice versa. So many things on the services side that those of us in tech land don't even look at, that would fundamentally change your business if you looked at things from a different perspective. I feel 100%. Like we could spend another 90 minutes digging into this, and definitely want to have you back on the show to dig in more. But we are coming up on this little thing that we call time, unfortunately. I really think we could do a whole series on this, but I digress. Ned, we'd love to do some rapid fire with you. You cool with that?
Yeah, let's roll.
All right, here we go. Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
What's the first app you check when you wake up in the morning?
Bible app, actually.
Nice.
I'm getting better. Getting better.
This is truly the first time it hasn't been something to the effect of Slack, LinkedIn, email, personal first, man. No. I love that.
Yeah.
Favorite guilty pleasure snack?
Ooh, crumble cookies. Is that a snack?
Yeah, that's a snack. That's a snack.
That's a meal. That's a full day calorie.
That's multi-day calories.
Yeah. Yeah.
If your company were an animal, what would it be and why?
A lion, because we like literally that's all we just hunt. Like all of our guys know. Like my VP of sales development literally sent a video in our like group chat today in Slack, and it was like the Spartan, like who are we Spartans? Like just so you're aware, home service is a very bro culture. So yeah, we do a lion.
I love that. Ned, if you weren't, I don't want to say if you weren't in tech, but if you're not in sales, whether it's tech or services, what profession would you be in, man?
I'd be a strength and conditioning coach. That's actually what I went to school for,
Nice.
and did a couple of internships with a couple NFL teams, a couple Division I football teams, and I kind of get bit by the business bug though. And maybe one day I'll go back. Who knows?
I love it.
What do you think about Belichick going to UNC?
I think it's super interesting with NIL.
Yeah.
I think he's a player developer, right? You've got the Patriots that won 6 Super Bowls with guys that you've never heard of ever, right? And it's like that's who Bill Belichick is. He's a player developer, and I think he'll be great.
Yeah, interesting. Last question, wrapping it up. Dream vacation destination besides someone's roof.
This is this is gonna sound douchey, but I live where people vacation.
Yeah.
I love being home. I travel a lot for work. We live at the beach. Like we surf every day. Like I love, my kids like love the beach. They surf. They do. It's just like we honestly like are super blessed. And so I would say my dream vacation is like coming home from work travel.
We feel the same way. I lived in Boston in Northeast for 30 years. I've lived down here now for 10. Feel the same way. I've been all over the world. I'd rather come to this quirky west coast of Florida anytime.
100%. Yeah.
Ned, thank you so much for joining, man. Where can people go if they're in need of your services? Because everyone listening is going to need services at some point in time.
Yeah, it's attyx.com, pronounced addicts. And you can tell that I come from tech when we merged the two companies and came up with that name for damn sure. But LinkedIn is where you can find me. And yeah, you can probably Google me and find some stuff. I don't know. Like, don't look too deep.
Ned, thanks so much for joining, man. We appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all.
Cheers.